it'll be interesting to look back on these conversations.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
a year from
5-10
now,
years
2 years from now, and just be like, "Wow, we were way overblowing this thing," or "Wow, we really underestimated, even though we thought it was going to be a big deal. We really underestimated,
underblew it.
Yeah.
We should add a quick
underblew."
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 401 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the webs programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm the artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is February 3rd, 20 Jubilee, or 2023. And before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. So buckle your pants, get ready. It's going to happen. And also thank you to our supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net, whose monthly donations keep our microphones going. All right, so let's get into it. It's been an interesting past week or so. We're wrapping up a bunch of work in Crashlands 2 for our next big milestone. But that's not what we really want to talk about today. What we're going to talk about is we've been playing around with some AI tools that we've scrounged up on the internet, and it's been pretty interesting. So the few that we've been messing around with are ChatGPT, which we've talked about in the past, which, by the way, just surpassed 100 million users.
Whoa, that's scaled real quick.
I think it hit 1 million in 5 days, which I think the next fastest growing app in the world was like Angry Birds at like 30 days or something like that for 1 million. So already it was growing, like 6 times faster than anything else.
Although how many of
it's hit 100
those
million.
accounts do you think are actually robot accounts?
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? It's
At
probably
least
a lot.
one.
At least one.
It's probably a lot of it.
So ChatGPT, which again, if you haven't played with this thing, just go talk to it.
It is still free to play with.
Yes. The free version of it is rate limited, I guess you would say, where its replies are a bit slower, and also when demand goes too high, as in like their servers are being bogged down, people using the free version of it are the first to go lose access and have to wait for it to come back. There is a way for you to get at sort of like a paid version of it. That's a little bit kind of harder to find, where you do just have priority access all the time. But yeah, just go free one. This thing, it's like it's a large language model. You can just type stuff to it and tell it to do things or compose things or explain things, and it replies.
Yeah.
Sometimes correctly.
Yeah, often correctly-ish. Rarely straight up correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this thing is growing so fast because people are recognizing the time save of being able to just kind of throw like the gist of an idea at this thing and have it, compose a fully featured document for you. Like I last week I was playing around with it and I was like, hey, ChatGPT, write an email for my boss with some suggestions on how we can improve communications in the workplace. And then it was so I wrote up this email. I was like, hey, boss, I've got some things have been going great this quarter. I got some great ideas on stuff we can do. And then it just made up some stuff, all of which were actual like real things that businesses do. Yeah, they're like good tips. But I saw it and I was like, this is coming off too heavy-handed. I'm an employee. I'm talking to my boss.
More differential,
I need to be more humble about it and not step on anybody's toes, And so I just told the robot,
the office politics.
Yeah. So I just told the robot like, hey, throw some flattery in there toward the boss and be more humble. And so it was like, all right. And then it just rewrote the email, and it was just hyping up the boss and how great things have been going and how great of a leader they are and stuff, while still making the suggestions. But then it even like mixed in references to like making up that the boss had suggested these a while back and that I thought they were a good idea and that we should like do them. Right. And so it's weird, right, that like you can get that coherent of a thing, and you can tell it to revise and stuff as if you were talking to a person, right? And it somehow
does it.
Can do it. So when playing around with that, there's a program called Descript, which we actually used quite a while ago like for some podcast experiments. It's kind of hard to describe what Descript is, but it's all about like audio transcription, but kind of in both directions. Yeah. It also has a video editor in there for some reason, which I haven't figured out.
It can also take audio.
Started as a transcription tool where you could then like it would get like real. It was like its goal is to have really good transcriptions of audio and video, right? But then to add this like fancy editing where because like they wanted to directly pair the text that they spat out with the audio and or video so that you could then edit the text and then have that snip out the course. Like you could delete a piece of text and have that, delete the corresponding thing. But they very quickly started to add these more fascinating features into it where not only could you just like delete stuff and have that snip out this corresponding video, but you could also just change the text to something else, right? And it would try to AI its way through having you say that stuff. I don't think have they done that with the video part too, or is it still just the?
I think they've done it with the video part yet, but they do have have auto. You could also just like auto scrub all of the ums and uhs from your speaking. I think that's what,
It can remove filler words.
Very strange. Yeah. So it's a fascinating little tool, and so. Basically, we're doing all this exploration stuff. We're kind of poking around. And again, we talked about AIs and the limitations of them a few episodes ago. The fact that they are, as it comes to ChatGPT, it's a stochastic parrot. So it does not know what it is saying. So
it doesn't actually have any opinions about anything or any knowledge. It's just
it's just saying stuff. And so again, the stuff sounds good, and so oftentimes can be misinterpreted as being very factual when in reality, again, it does not know exactly what it is saying. But that's it's getting better over time. But the questions start to pop up, which is like, okay, what if if we really zoom out for a second and start let's look at a bunch of these different tools. There's a really good website called Futurepedia where they actually just kind of list all of the AI tools that people have been building, everything from AI tools that make logos, some of them are kind of good, some of them are terrible, to AI tools that, help you write your code. So GitHub Copilot's on there, to the ones like Descript for audio management, video management, whatever. So you can kind of basically go there and just kind of scrub through all the places where this is things are creeping in this direction. They've been going this way for a while, of course, with machine learning. People call it the same thing. But and the question that started popping up was like, what is like one of the dumbest things you could do just as an experiment to chain all these tools together in such a way that it makes it like, just how far can we push this in terms of us not doing anything and having something come out the other side that appears as though we have done something. And so this is where I think Seth had the idea to see if he could have basically this chain of AIs generate a TED Talk, give the TED Talk, and have him actually not ever, didn't write or speak anything. And then the final question was, given how much time it takes typically to produce those, we talk about when we're practicing our talks and stuff, it's a minute, an hour of preparation typically per minute of the actual talk that you're giving. The question was, okay, what's that time look like then? So Seth, I guess I'll let you take it away from there as far as what you.
Yeah. So the three tools that I ended up using was ChatGPT, which I could just say, hey, write me a TED Talk about blah. And it knows what a TED Talk is. And TED Talks often have a pretty similar format to each other. So it just kind of mimics the concept of a short TED Talk. I went to Descript. And one of the things you can do in Descript is you can upload an audio track of you speaking. It will transcribe it. You can review the text for accuracy, so that you can make sure that the words that it thinks you're saying are the ones that that you actually did say. And you can then give that package. So it's the audio plus the transcript. You can give it that bundle of data, and it will make an AI text to speech voice with your voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sounds like you. It's just you talking.
It sounds like you. And so the cadence and inflections are not perfect. It's basically like a flatter version.
Yeah, actually, I tried it for me, and it just does not work for whatever reason for how I talk. I don't know.
Yeah, if you have a very dynamic way of speaking, it will still sound like the way that your voice sounds, but your speaking style won't exactly be
wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it's because
it's still close.
It doesn't have the semantic again, like none
It
of these things
doesn't
are
know what it's
standard,
saying.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't know what it's saying, and so it can't also look at the text and not just say, how does Sam say the word the, right? Or how does Sam say the word the when it's preceded by this other word or whatever, right? Because you need a huge corpus of stuff to be able to start making like a really fine model. But even when you have that, there's still enough nuance in intended meaning and how, like, you can even just hear the way that I'm saying things. I'm speeding up right now in certain parts, and I'm slowing down in other parts as I try to explain.
Yeah, and
like
you're
it goes higher,
thinking
lower.
about things.
Right, I'm thinking about So like you can't capture that in a way that doesn't sound artificial yet. Like we're not.
Yeah.
We're still at the moment very far from that level of apparent fluency of like a computer generated audio. Right.
But
it's still eerie.
Actually, pretty
It works pretty. It works. I'd say it's about 80%. As in, if you hadn't heard me speak before, and you heard this AI,
that's true.
And
it's
then
believable.
you heard me. Then you heard like me talking later. You would recognize the voice, right?
100%.
And then you would realize like, oh yeah, the AI was like kind of much flatter and a much more sort of consistent pace of speaking.
Yeah, but you can also see why, like, as a tool, not to just generate, completely new audio from scratch, but as a tool to edit existing audio, you can see how useful that would be, because the range of allowed values there is, on the one hand, like wider, because people will forgive like something that's slightly off in a broader context, because actually everything we do and say, every little moment is actually slightly off, because that's the whole, like, actually actually like naturally generated stuff is like largely chaos. There's just enough going on. There's enough of a redundancy in the information that's being transmitted that the fact that any one moment is actually really noisy is fine. And so that's why these tools can get away with this kind of stuff. They just have to be just good enough that in the context,
your brain kind of fills in the
that in the context of the real information, unless it's like really, really bizarre, then you don't even notice, right? But as soon as you try to generate an entire body of new text, it becomes harder and harder to do that in a way where somebody listening to it will think
fully natural.
Oh, that's a real person,
But that did do this. You trained up a voice. It's got an AI voice.
So I trained up a voice. Well, so I talked to ChatGPT and I said, write me a TED Talk about how I managed to turn my life around by starting a lawn mowing business. And so it did, but it was pretty generic and bland. Right. And I was like, add some stuff about some hardships that I had. And so then it kicks off the talk by talking about how my wife left me and I was like saddled with debt and like all this. Like it just made up a bunch of bad shit that happened to me. And then it kind of integrated that into the idea that like I was able to overcome all these problems by mowing lawns. But then I thought, this is still too believable. Like, this is something that a person could actually do, like start a lawn mowing business and actually have that be a fulfilling thing for them, right? Because it's a hard thing to do and it's a business and all
you
that
want to push
stuff.
this into onion territory, basically.
Yeah, I was like, I need to give a TED Talk about something stupid, and so I said, I just told the robot, just change lawn mowing to blinking, as in like I found meaning in life by blinking. But it I think reasonably interpreted that to mean sort of like paying attention to your blinking as a sort of mindfulness concept. And so then so my final revision of it was where I just told it, no, I mean actually blinking.
Like
as
I
in
discovered
the speaker of this TED Talk had never blinked before and all these bad things were happening to them. And then they finally tried blinking for the first time and then their life started improving and also their eyes were less irritated. And so it spun that up, turned this into a TED Talk, an inspirational TED Talk about finding spiritual enlightenment and turning your life around by finally deciding to start blinking.
It's
as
good.
well as ending the talk with encouraging the audience to also try blinking if they're.
It's a TED Talk. You gotta,
So it ended up being about a minute and a half long of a TED Talk, and it took me 4 prompts to revise it, going from the initial like lawn mowing business down to this thing. So I wrote 4 sentences to get this minute and a half long TED Talk. I threw it over into a Descript and it just plugged my voice into it.
I assume you trained Descript on one of your podcast recordings.
Yeah, I just dumped a podcast recording into it, which it takes it about a day to train up a voice. But then once you've got it, you've got it. Right. Yep. So yeah, it took it about, I don't know, 20 seconds to slap my voice onto this ChatGPT generated TED Talk.
So it took less time to talk for the audio to be generated from the talk than it would be for you to actually speak it.
To record it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's for a 1.5-minute talk. It would have taken a similar amount of time for like a 20-minute talk.
It's very fast.
Whatever, right? And then finally, I went to, there's a website called SoundRaw or SoundDraw, which you can generate music on. And it has a lot of like kind of preset stuff and then some other kind of like AI generated stuff. And it kind of like mixes it together and you can choose genres and styles and feels and whatever. And it just spits out like 24 songs and you listen through them and then, you know, you can like make variations off of one and stuff like that. So I put together some kind of inspirational music, threw it under this TED Talk, and then boom, I have a TED Talk about blinking that nobody wrote it, nobody spoke it, nobody wrote the music, and it's an audio clip that you can listen to. So that whole process took me a few hours, but it was actually because I spent most of that time trying out different tools and trying to figure out, you know, just how things work.
Now that you got your pipeline, you could technically.
Now that I figured that out, I did it again, and it took 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it took 6 minutes to make a 1.5-minute TED Talk. But actually, like, I could have just told ChatGPT, "Hey, just make this a lot longer," and it still would have taken 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. Like, so I could technically have like a 20-minute talk in a file that took 6 minutes to make, which is
it's
weird.
Really weird. The whole thing is weird. Just top to bottom.
Would it be a good talk worth, you know, listening to?
And therein lies the conundrum. So I was on Reddit a couple days ago, and I saw a comment by somebody, and I was like, I've been looking at enough ChatGPT shit to know that this comment reads like a ChatGPT
looks like
output.
AI. You're sort of like it's like a Blade Runner. You're like, I see you.
Something's uncanny about this comment.
It has no soul.
Yeah.
And way too perfect of grammar.
That's also true.
Well, it's a couple things. Yeah, it's this kind of opinionless nothingness that it kind of has, where
it doesn't have a personality. Is really what it comes down to, right? Like,
yeah. It's this very, it's very uncanny. So I clicked into this person's post history because I was like, why would this person use ChatGPT to reply to a comment on Reddit? Because this is now ChatGPT just saying something.
Yeah, to what end?
It's not you are not yourself like replying to the comment to add something to the conversation. You just had a robot sort of just dunk some words into it, right? And so I looked at this person's comment history, and they've got thousands of comments. Every few minutes, they are replying to something with ChatGPT. Just every few minutes, every like 3 to 5 minutes, boom, new ChatGPT generated reply to a comment. And after like all the thousands of comments they posted, they had accumulated like 50 upvotes total. Yeah. Because the stuff they're saying is nothing. It adds nothing to the conversation. It doesn't reveal anything. It's a weird, like, looks like a reply to a comment, but it's just nothing, right? And then I thought, this person is commenting on so many things so fast that they're not going to be the only one doing this.
Oh, no.
I don't know why they're doing it necessarily, but they're doing it.
Because they can, you know, like it's
because you can. Yeah. And I was like, you know,
why did you make that TED Talk? You know, it's because you could.
Just to see if you could.
Yeah. But the thing is, I'm not going to submit that. It was just like, how does this tool work? Right. And I think there's a difference between doing that and actually, because I've also seen, for example, YouTube channels that create AI generated music and they upload a music video every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Is it good? Nobody knows because nobody has ever listened to it, right? And some of those videos end up with like 10 views and some have 5 views or whatever, but it doesn't matter because this thing is just flooding YouTube with audio, right? And so I was like, you know, how long is it until you go to Twitter or Reddit or YouTube? And it's 99% or more robots posting things and robots replying to those posts, and then robots replying to the replies. And it's just a bunch of ghosts with no actual ideas or opinions or understanding. They're just doing stuff.
Yeah, there's no soul in what is happening, right? There's no actual connectivity, really?
Yeah, there's no goal or opinion or objective or thought or anything. It's just stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's a large fraction of stuff, as we talked about before too, written by people that I think falls into that same category.
100%.
Too, right? Like reading YouTube comments. I think it's the same deal. It's just like none of this needed to happen, you know?
Yep.
So I think, but it is like, it's the sheer volume at which
It's the volume. Yeah.
you can then take that kind of stuff that already is, I think, still the dominant form of content, you know, and out on the internet, is like the stuff that like just doesn't actually add anything in that context. But now it's not add anything.
Detracts.
Or detract, doesn't do anything. Well, if it's doing anything, it's usually just detracting in some way, right? But to something that's mostly just neutral noise. But people can train these things to be negative or positive or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think
or
over
to
time,
have
we're
worse
gonna see,
grammar or
I think
whatever.
over time we're going to see things that look a lot more like the kind of low value stuff that's made by people. I think we're going to have just lots and lots of that. And that's going to just absolutely overwhelm everything. And I think
everything.
Yeah.
the part where it actually becomes something that people do things about is when it starts to affect advertising. You know, like that's when advertisers start complaining because they're spending all this money and not seeing a return, right? Because it's only robots interacting with all their stuff actually. Then that's when the companies trying to sell advertising have to try to do something about all of this, right?
Yeah, but honestly, like if 1 in 1,000 Twitter accounts or Reddit accounts or whatever was doing this, like what this person was doing, it would be
half of all the content.
It would be like weeks before suddenly way more than half of the content on those sites is just nothing.
Yeah, it's a volume game you cannot reasonably compete with on a human scale.
I would think of this as the same as the email spam problem, right?
Yeah, it's or robocalling,
which is an ongoing, permanent problem, right? And but it's I think it's going to be the same kind of thing that we see there, where if you follow any of the stuff about like the history of email spam or its current state, or like what all the different email providers are doing to try to constantly combat it, right? There's a recurring theme over and over and over and over again, which is this whack-a-mole game of all of these various sort of gatekeepers trying to keep that shit out because of how rapidly it destroys the value of
a flooded,
email
a flooded network,
right?
Is a useless network.
It destroys it instantly, right? And
so we saw this with like Steam trying to figure out how to slow down the flood of games coming in, or on mobile, there just is a flood of games, and oh god, that's just how it is now.
There's just tons of stuff, right? But with email spam, there's of course a big financial incentive because it's usually they're trying to scam people, and they just need a small rate of scam returns to offset the cost of doing it, right? But it's become such a technical enterprise because of this arms race basically between email services and scammers and spammers, right? That the technical know-how required to do it just keeps going up and up and up and up, right? But also the tools that enable you to do it keep becoming more powerful, more accessible. So you keep having these waves where all of a sudden a huge crop of new people can come in and start scamming people and get under the radar for a little while, right? And then that gets pinched, and it keeps on just doing this as the tools keep getting better. But historically, it's been the case, just from at least as far as like people have been trying to track this stuff, that at any given moment in time, the vast majority of like email spam is coming from like one or two criminal organizations. Yeah. Right. Like there was, and again, it's a whack-a-mole though, right? Because they're always like out of reach or hard to find, all this kind of stuff. But I was listening to a podcast talking about one of the most recent ones, like in the mid 2010s. And there was this enterprise that was responsible for 80% of all spam.
Jesus.
80%, right? And they had this like really complicated enterprise where they were basically selling access to other scammers to their system,
their scam platform,
developed, right? To their scam platform. Yeah, it was literally, and actually that was how they made their money, was by selling spam as a service, right, to other criminal enterprises, right? Until they eventually got brought down, but because it's a game of whack-a-mole. Like
Somebody else will just
within
pop
a
it back
few
up.
months, like there was a new thing responsible for 80% of traffic, right?
Yeah, well, and there's this thing that the internet does, which is it's really good at centralizing power into one place, right? So you think about like what's happened with like Spotify and music, or Amazon and online shopping, or whatever, or Steam and PC gaming, right? It's really good at sort of coalescing, because the cost of you visiting Amazon is the same as you visiting any other website. You just type it in, right? So there's no more like location, there's no more store you have to go to or whatever. And so you're just going to bias toward going to the one that is more likely to have the stuff that you need.
The
right?
most networked one.
And so
you're right, because it's like
it's the network
whichever one
effect.
other people go to, and this is the reality of it. It doesn't decentralize; it sort of hyper centralizes actually, because
it creates winner take all markets.
Well, I think actually the idea is all markets are winner take all markets by default, right? Unless you actively work.
But
against
the
that.
internet just hyper accelerates
it's
the process.
internet. The internet converts all markets into one, which is right. Because like if you have a local market, you still have like the best coffee shop in the neighborhood, right? But you're limited by like how far is a person willing to drive, right?
And capacity. It's not like every person in the neighborhood can go to the same coffee shop. There's just not enough chairs, right?
Yeah. But as soon as the market is just the world now, or like your whole country or your whole state or whatever, like as soon as that scales up, and there isn't a difference in any two people's like access to that thing, just because they just get on the internet and order something or whatever, then because I don't think it's I think it's the idea of it like accelerating these things. I think it's not. I think it just changes the scale of the market.
Yeah, it's not constrained by the physical problems of scale that other platforms have. So the concern with stuff like this is, if you see this one person just doing this weird like Chat GPT thing on Reddit, that's like an interesting nothing burger. It's like, oh, that's weird that this person's doing this. But like you were saying, Adam, somebody could change the prompt of like what it is that they're having Chat GPT do, or how they're having it engage, right? And so somebody could very easily develop an API layer that sits on top of Chat GPT, where it says basically, hey, for $20 a month, you can have up to like 10 bots that go around these different websites commenting things based on whatever it is and however you want it to angle, right? And
all those troll farms will be out of jobs, unfortunately, because
immediately
they'll just be replaced by robots.
Yeah, but that's going to be a business model if it isn't already, and we just don't know
sure
about
it already exists.
Snow melts at the edges. Remember, so it's one of those like if you found that guy just with this, I think an AI even as a username, like it's not like a subterfuge he was running, right? It's just sort of like it's just a thing.
It's just a weird thing.
But it's like, okay, if he's doing it kind of more or less out in the open, then that there already are a lot of these AI bots running around in all these contexts, right?
And if you train stuff on the right data, and then you are using it in a place where things have low information density, right? So like comment sections of anything, social media, period, right? If you use them in those contexts, then it actually, because we're talking earlier about how like, you can spot these things and they're easy to see, right? And it's actually not true. You can easily see it when it's like straight Chat GPT, somebody like dumping it into some context, right? Yeah. But if someone just actually trains up a model at the quality of Chat GPT, or even significantly less, but in these low information density areas,
you won't be able to tell.
You won't be able to tell at all.
Yeah, the reason I was able to tell here is just because this guy just did not do a very good job of prompting it to sound more believable.
There's no flavoring going on.
Yeah. Which you'll see, like if you've played around with the image generation tool Midjourney, it has kind of a default style that it generates images in, and you can kind of tell. Yeah. But with just like one extra word you can throw in there, you can get a different style out of it, and suddenly it doesn't look like a Mid-Journey image anymore. It could be anything. Yep. Unless you just look at the hands, then you can tell that it's So, and then like there's other weird shit going on, like this infinite Seinfeld episode on Twitch, which is apparently like a few people did this as a passion project. They started like 4 years ago. Using some of their own AI tech. Like this was before OpenAI had ChatGPT available and stuff like that. So they're starting to integrate these other technologies. But the idea was can you make a 90s style sitcom that's like Seinfeld, but that's just continuously AI generated and it just goes on forever?
And it includes, includes video of the characters moving around, the camera looking at them. The audio.
Well, it shows that too. It shows Seinfeld specifically because its whole thing is it's a show about nothing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So they needed something. Again, there's like the low information density and the low like carry through of like one thing
Plot.
like into the future, you know. And so that was why they chose that as a
So it's basically just these clips back and forth of the characters in the apartment, and then interspersed with scenes like in the Jerry Seinfeld stand-up scenes where one of the characters, Larry in this case, they just made kind of mirror characters of the Seinfeld characters, will go up and tell these AI generated jokes to an audience. And the weirdest thing is like looking at Twitch chat, like replying to stuff, because every now and then there will be like an actually good joke in there, or there'll be something that's like so unexpected and it just like actually works. It kind of reminds me of we're doing some stuff in Crashlands 2 with like characters emoting, and right now we're just playing like random emotional sounds when they're speaking, and every now and then it just exactly lines up with the text, which is great. Other times it does something very different from what you expect, which is even better somehow. And so basically this AI generated Seinfeld episode is just randomly generating scenes and interactions and conversations. And like one of the things, and since it's continuous, then it's not like you can go back and like watch an episode of it. Yeah, if you miss it in the moment, then that's never going to happen again. And like there's this one I just checked it out yesterday, and for starters, it looks like shit.
I opened it up and I watched it for like a minute, and I was like, I hate everything.
It looks terrible, and the AI voices are just completely flat with no real emotion.
Clear.
But if you get past that,
Seinfeld's good. You know what I mean? Like it's an interesting show. It's very funny, and this is not that, but.
Honestly, though, I think it's alarming though how well some of the things land. So I just watched it for like 15 minutes just to see like what's the range of things going on here. At one point, one of them said it was like I've been working on my jokes, but I'm really nervous to tell them, And then one of their characters is like, oh, come on, you like try some of your jokes on us. And the first one goes, all right, here goes nothing. And then it just cut away to the next scene. And I was like, that was pretty good, actually. Right. That was nothing.
Right. But was that like,
was it
generated
intentional?
That way, or was it just
well, that's the thing. It was not intentional, because oftentimes they will have moments where somebody will be like
something else.
Somebody will be like, somebody said something really interesting to me yesterday.
And then it just cuts to the next scene.
Right.
So just
because the pattern is just like one thing and then a response and then another thing and then new scene, right? And so
sometimes the conversations go on for quite some time. Yeah. Apparently at one point people were saying, like yesterday, the characters all said like, let's all go to the park and feed some ducks. And then they left. And then it was just like several minutes of just different camera shots of the empty apartment with like weird music going on. And then sometimes the AI gets like stuck on things where like for like an entire several hour period, the characters would always start using the microwave at the end of a conversation. And then like, I don't know, it's just, you can see these weird things that the AI is just like doing stuff and getting like caught in these weird patterns. And so it's kind of fascinating, to watch.
Well, it essentially becomes a modern art project, really, in a way, right?
Yeah.
It's like
that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fascinating commentary on like what it is. What does it mean when you can infinitely generate stuff atemporally? Like when it takes so little time to create. It
takes the same amount of time to make it as it takes to watch
or
it.
Or less. That's the craziest part.
Or less,
right?
Yeah.
The less part is the part that weirds me out, because you can simultaneously have one of these things. This one bot could potentially be creating infinite, bad Seinfeld, but infinite Seinfeld episodes, while also creating infinite, bad Simpsons episodes. Like they can be happening simultaneously.
But the question is like, what happens next year, 2 years, 3 years from now, when it can actually make good episodes? Like, because then at that point, it's like, why, just tune in at any time and watch your favorite characters just doing unpredictable yet still like coherent and hilarious things. And if you stop watching it for a day,
It's gone.
You just missed it. Like it's like the ultimate, FOMO, right? Like the fear of missing out. You just want to keep watching it. So, I don't know. It's it's pretty interesting.
Well,
what's going on.
there's things like panda cams and stuff, right? Where it's like zoos set up the camera so you can just like tune in any moment, just see an animal doing some weird stuff, right? And of course, that always works because like they don't have to talk about things, right? So
it doesn't have to be an overarching story. With character development.
but I think that idea that there's this really wide range of kinds of content that people are interested in, and it includes this category of like ephemeral.
It's just living,
surreal, absurdist comedy.
Or just like observing things unfold, but without rhyme or reason, right? And I think, Seth, to your point, like I think like some aspects of AI are already encroaching that territory where they can, given the right setup, like if somebody comes up with the right way to create something, so like a show about nothing is a perfect kind of category, right? Or like a fake zoo where you're just watching animals do stuff, right? Or whatever, right? They're kinds of categories that you could come up with that already AI can like kind of do and generate that kind of stuff, right? And we're on the very like early part of that. But I think you're right that over time, as all that stuff gets better, we're going to see more and more of like these kinds of these new weird kinds of media of just perpetually generated ephemeral. And I think actually streaming is a good example of this. Like
streaming is, it's kind of the same category
for people, right? Yeah, it's like any moment of a stream, completely pointless and useless, right? It's the whole experience of like sitting down with other people, engaging in this largely ephemeral experience, right? Of like this other person doing stuff. And like so many of the things that people are streaming about these days are like they're just talking like while they're playing a video game, or they're just like walking around their house doing stuff.
It's basically a panda cam
while talking, right?
You know what I mean?
It's basically a panda cam. Yeah, exactly. And so like we already have this human generated kind of ephemeral show about nothing thing going on, right? That people are into. And I think we're going to see just more and more. And I don't think it's going to be like, oh, literally there's an infinite Seinfeld now, although something like that I'm sure will exist, an infinite sitcom, right? Because like sitcoms, again, like it's actually low information density, or it can be, right? So that'll probably be one of the earlier things to appear.
Well, and they take place in like, it's like an apartment, a coffee shop.
It's like 3 locations.
Yeah. There's like a few different locations, and it's mostly just characters talking. So you don't have to simulate giant, expansive like adventures across the, going to Mordor or whatever.
Movies would be a later thing.
Yeah, but if they seem like they have personalities, if the personalities seem like they interact, like that's, once we get there, that's when you can kind of generate this stuff, because that's basically now a streamer, right? It's the same idea, right? Again, any moment, who cares, right? But it's the participation in the whole thing. But I think we're going to end up seeing all kinds of really weird stuff that we can't conceive of right now because people can't stay awake making content 24/7, right? That just is happening in real time, and as that becomes feasible with different kinds of artificially created things, I think we're going to see just completely new genres of like weird robot made ephemeral like media experiences that'll come out. And,
well,
it's going to be
interesting. There's a cost benefit question from a company's perspective as well, which is if you're a company like Netflix that does streaming, or Hulu or whatever, and you see that, hey, this infinite Seinfeld episode has been going on for a month and has 15,000 concurrent viewers right now on Twitch, right? And it just kind of has like 10 to 15,000 viewers just at all times.
What is that? People are tuning in, right? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, but are they doing it because they're hearing about it and checking it out, or because like, is it a cycling in of people, or is there a community that's that big of people who are actually interested in it, or is it a community of people who are like just fascinated with the idea of this, and then like telling, and actually that what's actually been created is a community around this just bizarre, surreal performance art piece, right? That has within themselves developed some way of like engaging with each other that
the community has
all the value is, right?
Around the thing.
Yeah, because because I don't think if you played this thing on Netflix, I don't think any fucking person would tune into it, right? Because there aren't other people that you get to interact with while it's happening.
It's not engaging enough that if you didn't have the weird commentary from Twitch chat, like hyping up random things, then it would not be the same. But, like we're saying, if at some point it is able to make actually good episodes and character moments and dialogue and whatever, then, it's only a matter of time before you see some kind of infinite sitcom appear on these streaming services, because once they develop the tech to do it, then the returns are infinite, right? Like you just keep generating it, and every new episode you generate or every new piece of it you generate it costs.
Yeah. I still think
nothing,
it's so hard. It's so hard to generate content with enough humanity and information density that people can like be entertained by it for a significant period of time, just like on their own, unless there's some other thing going on, like, Twitch chat or whatever.
Yeah, I think your point about the community
I think
involvement being the major
I think we're still really far away from anything like, oh, it's literally an infinitely generated show that a lot of people actually enjoy. Like I think we're
solo. You mean?
Yeah, I think we're super far away from
maybe
that.
Here's a question. Do you think the concept of an infinite AI generated show in the video streaming space will be kind of like cloud gaming?
Oh yeah,
in the sense that all these different companies are going to be like, that's our holy grail. Like if we can figure
invest
that
all
out,
the money up front instead of having to do it, repeatedly and constantly. Yeah, but I think
whether or not it's actually good,
the best
doesn't
that
really enter the
AI can
conversation.
do, the best that AI can do is as good as its training set, right?
Right.
Which means the best that AI can do is how good people can do, right? That's still the limit, at least currently, until we come up with better ways to push those boundaries, right? But still, like, it's all about training sets, because again, they aren't doing things with intent. They're just computing training sets and then throwing noise in and spitting out data, right?
Yeah.
And so think about the average quality of your experience watching any piece of media, reading any YouTube comment, doing any whatever, right? Like that's the best case experience. Like think of like Seinfeld itself, right? Like you're not going to have a show you can't make an AI generated show that's as good as Seinfeld. It would just have to be like
You say
Seinfeld again.
Regression toward the mean, sort of.
Yeah, like it actually always has to be worse unless the training set is just the one thing. But even there, like it would, like what would it even mean for you to take like all of Seinfeld, use it as a training set, and then somehow extend that to like now just keep making Seinfeld, but it's all like artificially generated, right? Like I think the reality of the sort of inescapable fact, at least currently, with the way that all these things are currently done with machine learning versus artificial intelligence, because those are not the same thing, right? And everybody's calling it AI because that's easier, but none of this is AI, right? None of this
It's
is
predictive. It's a predictive algorithm based
all
on
of
a
it is
training set.
statistics. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
So if you take machine learning approaches that can only be as good as the incoming data, and then you're trying to generate like you want something of the quality of Stranger Things on Netflix. Like Stranger Things is a service selling, long form series, right?
Yeah, but I think
you're not spitting that thing out.
I think that's the case. I think the reality is that things that are not good are oftentimes still very enjoyable to.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is most things are made by people actually fall into that category. They're
it's not necessarily
medium-ish, right?
But
yeah,
it's amusing.
so,
it's a good, and especially if you're again. I think the interesting thing to me is like what Seth was keen into it, or what you were keen into it, the community aspect of that experience, right? Because so I watched The Bachelor with my wife. I watch dating reality TV shows, but specifically with my wife, and we talk about it, and we're always dunking on people, whatever. And it's like, would I just watch them like just by myself? And like never talk to anybody, or never like look at, like, one of our most favorite things to do is after like an episode of The Bachelor to go look at Twitter and be like, what does the world think about this person's behavior? And then there's all these memes and stupid stuff, right? And it's like,
yeah, but that's the point that I'm making, which is that there are certain kinds of experiences, like you're describing, that will be enabled by machine learning relatively soon, right, in some form or another. And like we're already seeing that with this infinite Seinfeld thing, right? Yeah. But there are other things that the current approach literally can't do. It's not going to be generating like, oh, now all of our TV shows are great and made by AI, like, or made by machine learning. Just that's not on the radar. That's not going to be happening. But we're going to see more of these like weird other kinds of experiences that will have to largely be that a huge fraction of the value is coming from externally to the media itself, because the media itself, like it doesn't have enough value on its own, but some aspect of it makes people want to engage with each other, right? To talk about it. And I think anytime you take one of these, like, again, these low information density kinds of things, like a lot of reality TV, right? Like that's exactly, I think that's a perfect model of this, right? Which is, there's a reason there's a million reality TV shows on like any random fucking topic you can think of. If someone just, an ideas guy just mashed an idea into another idea and was like, what if we pit people against each other and put $1 million on the table with this insane thing, right? And many, like I've tried to start a bunch of them as they appear on Netflix, you know, and I'm immediately like, just like feel hatred for the thing in my soul and I have to turn it off, right? But there are others that I start and I'm like, oh, I can see why people are engaging with this, you know?
It's abusing.
And because like the risk profile is really low because they're so cheap to make and they can just spit them out, right?
Yeah.
But again, the value of that comes from people talking about it externally. And I think that kind of content, I don't think literally reality shows, but I think things that are represented by that
It's Panda Camp. It's the same idea, right? It's like,
yeah, that's gonna be where we're gonna see a lot of the actual like production level media made by machine learning go into.
Yeah, but it is gonna be the case that the end game of all this is any company with a budget to invest in R&D that is in the like video streaming or entertainment space is going to be thinking about this in terms of if we can develop a piece of tech that allows us to create extremely high quality shows just at the press of a button.
or
right?
even medium quality, right?
Or even medium quality, right? As long as it's better than the average, then the volume will win, right? Because like if you can get 50 pretty good new shows just like created every week and launched somehow, then you no longer have to take pitches from humans creating these shows.
I have one argument in favor of that position and one against it. So the one in favor is Christmas movies. I was listening. You guys listen to Business Wars? There's a podcast.
No.
Business Wars is a podcast I recommend. It's pretty fun. It's always just like two businesses, historically, some recent, some old, whatever, but two businesses that went against each other and one won, the other failed, and it's just like telling the story of that, right? So it's fascinating. It's really kind of fun. But one of them that I listened to a while ago was about like the Hallmark. I think it's the Hallmark Channel.
Yeah.
And how the way that they kind of like pulled themselves out of like almost disappearing was by just like going so fucking hard into their Christmas movies, right? And every year they just did like more and more Christmas movies, right? And every year they were like, people on the board were like, there's no way that if we just add like, because they're already doing like 30, there's like, and every year they're trying to do more, right? And there was like, there's no way that we can just add more and people will still watch them, right?
Yeah, and they're all the same in terms of it's the concept.
Yeah, to the point where like it's a genre and kind of it's like a jokey genre, right? Where people are like,
it's like
again, you mash a few ideas together.
Right?
Yeah, it's like a B-horror, yeah, same idea. But what they found was that no matter how, and they're all like just middling movies, right? Like in terms of this idea of like middling content, right?
I think from a script standpoint, AI might have a good crack at one of those.
They really could. They really could. But they just found that they didn't see a drop off in value. Like so like whatever that economic curve is, where you keep on dumping.
Yeah, they haven't hit like a substantiation point with their audience.
And that's despite having like 30 movies or whatever. And so then other companies were taking note of this, right? Because there's a reason, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like in the past few years on Netflix, like number of Christmas shows is really like,
oh yeah,
there are
really climbing and I think it's just like Christmas stuff, like schlock that you buy for your Christmas season, right? There's a reason that shit keeps creeping earlier and earlier and earlier. And there's a reason why there's so much of it and so much, like there's so much Christmas themed house stuff that is just garbage to mid-tier, right? It's like just all garbage, right? But the reason it exists is because that thing has a particular kind of value to people, right? Where they can't get enough of that mid-grade content. Like there's
is that people like the comfort of the familiar.
Yeah.
And also they like novelty. So if you can keep giving them new things,
familiar stuff,
that still are basically the same as the old thing, but it is a new thing technically, then they'll just jump on it.
Yeah.
Right?
So
And that's where I'm like,
my argument in favor of your position is Christmas, basically, because like, to me it doesn't make any sense, but that is what actually happens, right? But the argument against it is my own experience with like the app stores, right? Which is, and even Steam, is as those have gotten noisier because there's just so much stuff. And actually also things like Netflix and stuff, right? Because it used to be I'd pop into Netflix, whatever they were like top shows or recommended for you. If I watched it, I would have a great time. And that was true even just a few years ago. Now it's like I almost definitely am going to have a bad time if I just pick something, right? Like I have to now hunt for stuff that's going to be good, or like go online to like read what's the best stuff. You know,
you're saying there is an externality to high volumes, which is
noise and
searchability.
Yeah. And unless there's some other reason for you to accept middling content like Christmas or a social experience over the infinite Seinfeld, right? Unless there's some other reason, then if things drown in middling content, then they become a place that people don't go anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we're also going to see this as like AI drowns out
everything.
Everything.
Twitter, Reddit.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying social media, like, because there's a reason, like, I stopped being on Facebook probably for the same reason that you guys did years ago. I mean, years and years ago at this point, but I stopped being on there because it used to be a place where I interacted with people and had like conversations, like figured out what people were up to. And then it became a place where people just like posted every little minutia about their lives. Right. Yeah. And then it went from there to a place where people just posted hot takes about their bad political beliefs. Right. And like that was
interspersed with baby pictures.
Right. And so the value to me, there was so much noise there that the value to me to stay for the stuff that wasn't noise just kept on going down. And you can also see this too, where like Facebook is like clearly trying to find ways to generate revenue again. And like, I mean, this is even pre-AI stuff, because like none of that was an AI problem.
Yeah, right.
And like you look at what Google search is trying to deal with right now too, where Google search is becoming less and less useful over time because advertising companies are becoming, or I guess companies that rely on advertisements are becoming so good at juicing Google search optimization that you can't search for anything without finding garbage at the top, right? And so to the point where it's actually starting to impact Google's ad revenue, right? And like, but it's always been this constant battle of just like low to middling value
signal and noise, basically,
overwhelming the stuff that we actually care about. And I think we're all in agreement that AI, no matter what forms it's going to take, is going to accelerate and exacerbate this problem so dramatically.
It's going to blow it up. I think
we're already failing to handle it. Like
with just people, with the constraints that they
on
have.
every dimension. Like you think like the troll farmers of the 2016 election, all this kind of stuff, right? Like we're failing so aggressively to actually deal with this already. And all
we've been able to get by.
Yeah, but we're just getting by, or like slowly decaying, you know. But I think
the 2020s are going to be the era of noise, basically.
Yeah, I think we started that in the mid 2010s. I think like
with the social media stuff.
Yeah, I think social media started the era of noise. And I think we're gonna get, and then AI is gonna just fucking.
We're gonna be deaf.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of that saying of like, what happens when an unstoppable force hits an immovable object, right? Yep. And it's like, what happens when you have all these economies and all these companies that are built to be able to handle infinite scale, right? To just have like as many YouTube videos as people can upload, we'll take them. As many Twitter posts as people can post, we'll take them, right? All these things that are supposed to be able to scale infinitely, and then you create tools that actually do scale the inputs infinitely. Then what happens?
It's not,
because they're supposed to be able to handle it as long as it's people, you know. But if it's not people anymore,
well, and we've also been seeing this recently too, with like the sudden apparent realization in the tech space that infinite scale is an insane goal, right? And so you have.
Yes.
But also, and it doesn't work because of basically robots most of the time, right? Because like, so Heroku, if anybody out there's in the web tech space at all, you'd be familiar with the company Heroku, because they were like the entry point because they basically had a free account tier where you could like spin up a little server that they made really easy for you. Just like click a button, you got a server now, and you can like, and they would automatically have like WordPress on it, or like a whole bunch of kinds of things that you might want to go play with or use, right? And they had this free tier where you could just like spin up something and throw some code on it. And so like everybody who was learning web development over the last like decade was like putting shit on Heroku, right? And then a few months ago, all of a sudden Heroku was like, our free tier is too riddled with scammers and spammers and people mining crypto and like all of this stuff, right? And we just can't have it anymore. Like, there's not a way for us to keep this.
It's a tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, and keep it like financially viable. And so we have to
because the scale is infinite, right? That's what you're talking about. The
it's infinite.
ability to take advantage of it is actually infinite, which is very different than it. I mean, it's one thing to be like, like, oh yeah, X percent of real people who are coming into our supermarkets are like shoplifting a little bit, and so we're getting a little bit of loss. It's very different if that number could just
keeps growing,
just go up.
If you're like, there's one guy on the other side of the neighborhood who has an infinite army of robots that just keep shoplifting. That's a different problem.
Yeah, it's a very different problem. Even if you start with the ability to like theoretically infinitely scale your shelves, it's like, well, how much of your resources now are just given the infinite shoplifters infinite stuff? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Here?
So then the only next move is for somebody else to develop an infinite army of robots that intercepts the shoplifting robots and steals shit back from them.
Yeah,
and that's basically what like the Google's email spam filter is, right? Is like,
it's true.
It's their own army of robots trying to detect and mitigate this onslaught of just noise. So I think what we're going to see over this next decade is going to be this just fascinating. There's going to be some implosions and explosions of various sorts of like the thing, because we're not ready for it at all. But it's going to be really, because I think the only way that we can like survive this next move really is a whole bunch of like also legal and institutional changes. But that's a
they always play
slow and unlikely
will
process.
not happen.
but companies themselves that like rely on there being some level of like actual information density are going to get hit by this really hard. So I think what we're going to see is a sudden kind of closing down of what used to be like everything's about scale, free tiers, infinite everything, like that, and we keep your
publish
stuff
a video on
forever,
YouTube for free.
Publish a video for free.
Even if it costs $1.
Yeah. So I think we're going to start to see this kind of a thing where I think we're going to start seeing gates go back up.
Yeah.
And I don't know what those gates are going to look like, and I don't know if they're going to be successful, but I think that's going to be the fastest way for people to mitigate this onslaught is basically by dramatically increasing the cost of entry so that the value proposition of like having just infinite robots dumping infinite content goes down because there is no value in doing that actually, right? Like you don't get anything out of it. And so people aren't going to be willing to, and I think that's going to be what it comes down to always is like, it's a resource management problem. It's like, how do you make it just expensive for people to do that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought where the value of something like Twitter or Facebook or Reddit or whatever for people is like they can just make an account for free and just start posting.
Yep.
Right. Which that model only works if it is people.
Yes.
And as soon as it's not, the platform will utterly collapse under the volume of robots, and people won't go to it anymore. Right. So yeah, you're right. The only way to save it is if we look back at Steam.
That's what I was
when
saying.
when Steam had, they went through 3 phases. First phase was if you want to launch your game on Steam, you send it to Valve and they say yes or no. Next phase was Steam Greenlight, where you could, for free, create a Greenlight campaign where it's basically a pitch to the Steam community, and then they could vote on whether they would like to see this game come to Steam. That worked well at first. But then the volume problem happened, which is people started just putting just the dumbest, weirdest shit on there, really low effort, like, oh yeah, I slapped this together in an afternoon and here's this dumb game about a frog or something.
Or just memes about Valve that would show up in there,
Yeah. And sometimes those games would get upvoted just for the lulz, as they say, right? And so it turned out that it didn't really do a good job of being a filter for high quality games, and also the volume of things on there made it so that if you were a legit game developer with an actual good game, it would just be buried. I still remember when we launched Quantopus Rampage on Android, and
touch girl, touch boob.
Yeah, we were in the list right next to a game called Touch Girl, Touch Boob. And there was another game right on the other side of it, which was similar. And they both just had an icon of boobs. And it's like that.
We raised up the charts together. We were literally watching us go from like, whatever, bajillionth place, like, because like Watch for Image did well. Like it went way up to the top of the charts during that little brief window. But the whole time we were just chasing Touch Girl Touch Boob, and I don't think we
were
ever
neck and neck with Touch Girl Touch Boob.
I don't think we ever overcame it, did we?
Probably not.
It's a hard one to overcome,
Yeah, but that's the thing. Is like the algorithm of the store will treat everything equally, for some amount of time, and hope that the community will kind of filter.
Well,
things out
there was actually another phase of Steam also, which they've never said anything publicly about. But seems to be the general developer experience, which is when you first launched your game, they would make sure some number of eyeballs got on it. Right.
It used to be half 1,000,000 impressions.
Some like large number of impressions. And this was sort of this sounds like, oh, that's really nice that they would like, but actually the reality is they were trying to collect statistics on, do people engage with this game and do they buy it? Because if they do, then you need a large enough sample size. And for anybody who's ever looked at like the data behind engagement on stuff, like 500,000 views is not actually as big as it sounds like it is, right? Because the rates of people engaging with stuff are so tiny. But even still, like, they needed enough to get a good statistical sampling to then say like, okay, now we know kind of how to treat this game and if it's going to get juiced up the charts and all this stuff. And maybe they still do that for new releases. I'm not sure, but it used to be the case that you could sort of trigger, you could like earn
a visibility
by
round.
Good performance, like the ability to like have that happen again, sort of, right? And over time,
still have visibility rounds, but the total number of impressions you get is not.
Just keeps going lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, because there's just more and more games. Yeah. So the final phase of Steam then was
it's now kind of bring your own customer base is kind of what it's become.
Yeah. Yeah. And you pay to launch your game. There's no more green light. You drop, I think it's like $100 or something.
But you still don't pay per game, right? And Steam still, because you pay per
Steam,
company, right?
Steam is per game.
Is it per game?
iOS and Android.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you see on those storefronts is that there are publishers on the mobile storefronts that just put out, again, like to the idea that this is not an AI problem, this is a problem that will be exacerbated by AI, right? Yeah. Where there are companies that just put out these like really
asset
flip, low effort things, but they've actually, like, there are companies whose entire business model is to spit out a new game every 2 weeks, right? Where they have like what they've built is the infrastructure to allow them to do that, to make these like just like middling tier games, right? With the idea being that if they can spit out enough of them cheaply and kind of like in many ways just overwhelm the system, because if you're responsible for 10 of the games that came out when the charts flipped right to the next round, right, then sure, there's still a lot of other games in there, but you're now actually representing a weirdly significant fraction of like the games released, and so the chances of like something going well for you just went way up, right? And they just rely on that.
It's taking a approach for ad revenue, which is to say that instead of saying like we have a game that is extremely engaging that people stay with for 180 days, tons of play sessions, all the ad revenue comes from this one game, which is how most game developers work. They basically work on the opposite, which is to say people basically get this game, they play it for literally 15 minutes twice.
Yeah, they see
and they
10
never
ads.
touch it again because that's
Right.
but they see 10 ads in the process, and then every 2 weeks we crank out another one of these, whatever else, and over time you're basically building as a portfolio an ad revenue engine, but not as any individual game. Which is
But then again,
it's just a net to catch people in. Yeah.
Well, but also what it is it's competing against the noise, but you're doing it by adding to the noise, right? It's like the same
the noise.
Yeah, it's the same as like you're driving down the street and you see like a fucking 10
billion billboards.
10 billboards, right? All competing for your attention. And like the only way they can keep competing is they get bigger or taller, right? And so
Or more,
right? And the only reason we aren't just literally covered in billboards constantly is because of laws that don't allow people to do that. Because otherwise we absolutely would be. And anywhere where the laws are more lax, like Missouri, right? Compared to other places I've been. I hate so much driving down the St. Louis like highways, where it's a beautiful city with like interesting stuff going on, but I don't even get to look at it because there's fucking billboards every day.
Yeah. But I mean, therein is the problem, where what happens when this company that publishes a game every 2 weeks can do it every 2 hours, right? which we are like single digit years away, maybe like 2-3 years away from at most, I would say, for enough of these kinds of tools, AI assistant tools, to make it possible to do that. And then, everything just kind of breaks down. So,
yeah. And then
anyways, very interesting stuff.
The fast, immediate solution to that is on the mobile stores, is you have to pay a fee per game, right?
Yeah.
And then over time, it'll be like making that fee higher as it becomes a more difficult problem, right? And that has its obvious downsides too, right? Because now that increases the barrier to entry to just actual people who are making useful stuff but don't have available resources, which has always been the problem with all of these things. Like when Heroku got rid of its free stuff, right? Like again, that was like the place where like everybody who was trying to teach themselves web development, a huge fraction of whom were like doing it on the side as they were like dealing with a job that they hate.
You don't have it.
They don't have the resources available to like go pay money to use it, right? And because of all this other stuff happening, of people like trying to overwhelm all of these systems to get whatever that advantage is out of there, then this is what we end up with: is we can't have nice things.
This is why we can't have nice things.
If only, as it always comes down to, if we just had universal basic income, people wouldn't have to do this stuff, and then it would be easier for everybody. So,
oh, they still would though.
But not as
for the lulls.
Yeah,
for the lows.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. This is all pretty wild stuff. I just want to make sure that we are. It'll be interesting to look back on these conversations.
a year from now,
2 years from now, and just be like, "Wow, we were way overblowing this thing," or "Wow, we really underestimated, even though we thought it was going to be a big deal. We really underestimated,
underblew it." We should add a quick,
underblew.
I don't know what that was. Caveat, because we're talking about Descript and like making a model of your voice and stuff, right? It's not immediately obvious because this is all new stuff, and there aren't any laws around it yet. But absolutely, do not use other people's voices to make training model. Like, yeah, it'll be fun. It would be amusing to go like take somebody else's audio and be like, "Ooh, I can make them say stuff," or whatever, right? But just take a moment and like think about what you're doing because it seems harmless at first, right? But if you think about it, that's pretty fucked up and really should require consent. It should legally require consent. We're not there yet, but I think obviously ethically it requires consent.
Yeah, Descript requires you to record a thing when you upload your own basic voice recording saying that it's you.
Yeah.
And it's you talking to
which of course there are ways around it, but it's kind of like having a lock to your house, right? Like somebody could just break through the window, right? But at least like it's going to be a much bigger problem. So Descript has some kind of safety mechanism there. It's not perfect, but at least it's something.
Well, it's more just telling you not to do it is really all it's doing, right? So it's just a reminder
we're going to do the same.
That shit isn't harmless. so don't do it.
Don't do that.
Yep.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the archives. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.